Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Earthfiles YouTube live stream broadcast on this October 23rd. And I just heard from my brother a little bit ago that the forecast here in Albuquerque, New Mexico tomorrow is snow, high winds. We can't believe it. It has been so beautiful, but you can see how Fluffy's coat is just so big, and Chocolate and Fluffy are getting ready for winter, and I'm going to put them down because they've been playing around, but I wanted them to be able to say hello and be able to talk with you because there's some really important material to go through tonight. And I hope you're maybe even taking some notes, and that in about maybe a half hour that Peggy will be giving me your questions. But this is about the so-called metamaterials that are making headlines today. And one of the most important is the bismuth magnesium zinc that I have been trying to get to the bottom of for the last 22 years, going all the way back to the spring of 1996. When Art Bell and I, working on Dreamland and Coast Radio together, he received a box, first box. There were two shipments, and the first box had squares and ovals that were sort of silver colored, not very bright or shiny, more dull. Had also what looked like a round piece that, if you think of a phonograph record, and if you also think of something like sheets of metal that would have very thin vents in them. And when that box came, Art called me up and he said, I've got a letter and I've got this strange material. Well, that's 1996. And as recently as Friday, October 18th, Gizmodo.com and other tech websites headlined, "The Army just contracted with Tom DeLonge's UFO group to study those alien alloys." The headline is referring to a contract with the U.S. Army to investigate another piece of the micron layered metal that TTSA got from me earlier this year. It's a piece that I had been trying to understand since that May 1996 period when we got the second box that turned out to be the bismuth magnesium zinc. And that was when an Army sergeant working for the United States sent 6 small pieces to Art Bell on Coast to Coast after he had sent the aluminum. And Art asked me to investigate all of it. And to date, no one publicly, so far, to my knowledge, has ever been able to reproduce or demonstrate what the function of the micron layered metals might be on a craft of unknown origin, referred to in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s as a UFO, and more recently, now in this century, there's been an effort by political and military people to switch it from UFO to unidentified aerial phenomena, but they are essentially one and the same. Now, there is a hypothesis by TTSA physicist and engineer Hal Puthoff, PhD, that the bismuth magnesium zinc and its micron layered metal, its nanotechnology, could serve as a waveguide for very high terahertz frequencies that can manipulate the atomic and molecular level of matter. I reported in the 1990s that military whistleblowers told me the bismuth magnesium zinc, if correctly activated, perhaps by specific high frequency terahertz, could neutralize gravity and cancel out inertial forces. That might explain how some UFOs are seen traveling at thousands of miles an hour and then stop in midair or do a 90 degree turn, and that what Dr. Puthoff and other scientists like Jacques Vallée, the astronomer, I've worked with him on a piece of the bismuth magnesium zinc as well. And what they've discovered is that generating specific high frequencies that Dr. Puthoff has hypothesized about, turns out it's not easy. Now, today in 2019, the micron layered bismuth magnesium zinc metal has become increasingly important as the sciences of nanotechnology and terahertz frequencies have evolved. All electromagnetic radio waves travel at the same speed, the speed of light, which is 186,282 miles a second. The key to all of this is the length of the different wavelengths. So they all travel at this, like the speed of light, but the lengths of the waves are key. Terahertz radiation is known as sub-millimeter radiation, or terahertz waves, or tremendously high frequency that is abbreviated as all caps THF, T-rays, T-waves, T-light, T-lux, or capital TH, little z. Now, to put this into some kind, I hope, of comprehension, 1 terahertz equals 1 trillion hertz. And on the illustration that we have up, the terahertz is where the two lines are coming together, right between the infrared and microwave. Now, 1 hertz equals 1 cycle per second of sound waves. And the average human ear can hear from only 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Now, terahertz is a very short wave, about 1 millimeter to 0.1 millimeter. We're getting down to the size, say, of a human hair. And this is a trillion times shorter than Hertz waves. A trillion times shorter than Hertz waves. Now, where all of us run into terahertz these days are in the scanners at airports where you raise your arm above your head, and those extremely short waves are said to penetrate our clothes to reveal metals such as guns, but are not supposed to penetrate our skin. Dr. Hal Puthoff has suggested that high terahertz frequencies applied to the bismuth magnesium zinc layered metal would be so short that they could manipulate matter at the atomic and the molecular level, such as bismuth, magnesium, and zinc. Now, today I prepared a special link for all of you to get easily to all 7 parts of my bismuth, magnesium, zinc Earthfiles science reports that have evolved for the last year, and put them in one convenient place. All are freely accessible. There's no charge. So I hope after this Earthfiles YouTube broadcast, because I'd like you to stay with me and then go study these files after the broadcast. If you can study them, just go to www.earthfiles.com/bismuth. It's all lowercase, spelled BISMUTH. www.earthfiles.com/bismuth. I have been trying to figure out what the metal pieces are and what they do since April and May of 1996, when I was reporting all of my investigations and discoveries on North American radio in the programs Dreamland and Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell. We received the first of 5 typed letters, each postmarked from South Carolina and just signed a friend. And the first one, dated April 10th, 1996, ended in these words, quote, "I am passing through South Carolina with an operational readiness mobility exercise and will mail this just prior to the exercise, possibly from the Charleston area. I will listen to your broadcast to receive any acknowledging or confirmation that you have received this package." And he is referring first to the aluminum that came in April. Later in May, he sent the bismuth, magnesium, zinc. "This letter and the contents of this package, the aluminum, are given to you with the hope that it helps contribute to discussion on the subject of UFO phenomena. I agree with Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, a good friend of mine, who dared to say, at the White House no less, that there are things out there which boggle the mind and are far beyond our ability to comprehend. Sign me, a friend." Later, the writer called me and explained he was active U.S. Army headed to the Middle East. And in that September 1996, the United States launched cruise missile strikes on Iraq, codenamed Operation Desert Strike, against air defense targets in southern Iraq in response to an Iraqi offensive in the Kurdish civil war at that time. The letter writer said that at that time, he was going to Iraq, and that he did not know if he was going to make it back, and that was why he had decided at that time, that spring of 1996, to send first the box of the metal pieces along with a handwritten diary by his grandfather, who died in 1974. Now, I asked this U.S. Army sergeant on the phone if the highly strange content of the letters that Art and I were receiving was copied exactly word for word from his grandfather's handwritten diary. And the Army man said yes, that he typed the 5 letters with exact excerpts from his grandfather's diary, and that he shipped with that first letter, dated April 10th, 1996, several pieces of the gray square, small square and ovals, and that this 2-inch kind of phonograph record that I was describing earlier is on the far left of the photo. And then there were also these 3 golden metallic sheets, the thin in the middle and on the right. They were very peculiar with small, thin vents in them. I had one of the small gray squares tested by Alcoa Aluminum, and Alcoa called me and said that what they got was 99.5% aluminum. And Alcoa, the representative, said they did not manufacture in such purity, and they wondered where I got that piece of 99.5% pure aluminum. The typed letter with the aluminum pieces has some startling statements that they do sound like science fiction. But as I share excerpts with you from that first April 10th, 1996 letter, keep in mind that the Army sergeant stressed with me on the phone that he was quoting word for word not all of everything in the grandfather's diary, but that the 5 letters typed were representative of what his grandfather had written, and that the grandfather wrote that he was in a security team that surrounded, and he used these terms in the diary, a wedge-shaped craft like a piece of pie of unknown origin that crashed, quote, between San Mateo Mountains and Sierra Blanca Mountains, straight west of Roswell, New Mexico, close quote. You can see on this map that the San Mateo Mountains run along the western border of White Sands Missile Range. Sierra Blanca Mountain is 90 miles west of Roswell on the eastern border of White Sands. So if the grandfather's diary notes are true, The crash site was on or near White Sands Proving Ground after 1947 because the grandfather's diary references the U.S. Air Force, and it was not officially formed until September 18, 1947, along with the Central Intelligence Agency. The first April 10, 1996 letter from the U.S. Army Sergeant begins, quote, "Dear Mr. Bell, I followed your broadcast over the last year or so and have been considering whether or not to share with you and your listeners some information related to the Roswell UFO crash," close quote. Now that is apparently the grandfather who uses the phrase Roswell UFO crash. But Roswell would be at least that 90 miles east of Sierra Blanca Mountain. And the fact is that between Sierra Blanca and San Mateo mountain range is White Sands, the atomic bomb and rocket testing proving ground in the 1940s that became the White Sands Missile Range in 1958. The second paragraph of the April 10, 1996 typed letter continues, quote, "My grandfather was a member of the retrieval team sent to the crash site just after the incident was reported. He died in 1974, but not before he had sat down with some of us and talked about the incident. I am currently serving in the military," and that was the Army, "and I hold a security clearance, and I do not wish to go public and risk losing my career and commission. Nonetheless, I would like to briefly tell you what my own grandfather told me about Roswell," which I'm going to suggest that you think that even though you may be seeing words that say Roswell, this is definitely taking place to other pages between Sierra Blanca and the San Mateo, so it has to be in the White Sands region, not Roswell. "In fact, I enclose for your safekeeping samples that were in the possession of my grandfather until he died, and which I have had since his own estate was settled. As I understand it, they came from the UFO debris and were among a large batch subsequently sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio from New Mexico," close quote. That sentence by the grandfather indicates that this wedge-shaped craft did not come down in the summer of 1947 because Wright-Patterson Air Force Technical Base was not established until January 13, 1948. So where these aluminum and the bismuth magnesium crash came from, I think it had to be in 1948 or beyond. Continuing with the letter, quote, "My grandfather was able to," and he put in quotes the word "appropriate the metals," and that word "appropriate" being in quotes suggested a kind of sense of humor in the grandfather about his breaking off pieces of metal from the wedge-shaped UFO, which would have been a violation of security protocol. And the grandfather wrote that he learned that the square and oval metallic samples are, quote, "pure extract aluminum," close quote. The Army sergeant added, quote, "You will note that they appear old and tempered and that they have been placed in tissue paper and in baggies for posterity. I have had them since 1974, and after considerable thought and reflection, give them to you. Feel free to share them with any of your friends in the UFO research community." He said, "I have listened to many people over the years discuss Roswell and the crash events, as reported by many who were either there or who heard about it from eyewitnesses. And the recent Roswell movie that was on TV was similar to my grandfather's own account, but a critical element was left out, and it is that element which I would like to share. As my granddad stated, the team that he was doing the security in arrived at the crash site just after the Army Air Force, U.S. Air Force, reported the ground zero location. They found 2 dead occupants hurled free of the disk." Now here is another explanation. The grandfather used the term capital D, ISC, throughout his 5 letters for the crashed UFO. But his own letters also describe the shape of the UFO disk as wedge-shaped, like a piece of pie. So now, continuing the grandfather's diary words, quote, "A lone surviving occupant was found within the disk, and it was apparent its left leg was broken. There was a minimal radiation contamination, and it was quickly dispersed with a water solvent wash, and soon the occupant was dispatched for medical assistance and isolation. The bodies were sent to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for dispersal. The debris was also loaded onto 3 trucks, which finished the onload just before the sun set. Granddad was part of the team that went with the surviving occupant, and the occupant communicated via telepathic means. It spoke perfect English and communicated the following." This is a quote. "The disk was a probe ship dispatched from a launch ship that was stationed at the dimensional gateway to the Terran solar system," Terran being a substitute word for Earth. "The occupants were part of a race of explorers from a solar system 32 light years from Terra. They had been conducting operations on Terra for over 100 years. Another group were exploring Mars and Io. Io is the most volcanically active moon of Jupiter and our entire solar system." And continuing with the type letter, quote, "Each probe ship carried a crew of 3. A launch ship had a crew of 100. The disk that crashed had collided with a meteor in orbit of Terra and was attempting to compensate its flight vector." So this is definitely different from the lightning bolt in July of 1947. If this is in 1948 or 49, the letter from the grandfather about his telepathic download from the being is saying that it was a meteor that hit their vehicle, their UFO vehicle, and that the vehicle was attempting to compensate its flight vector after it was hit by the meteor. But because of the collision, the interatmospheric propulsion system malfunctioned, and the occupants had sent out a distress signal to their companions on Mars. The launch ship commander made the decision to authorize an attempted soft landing on the New Mexican desert. At the same time, the interatmospheric propulsion system had a massive electrical burnout, and the disk, which is wedge-shaped like a piece of pie, was soon virtually helpless. There was another option available to the occupants, but it involved activating the dimensional power plant for deep space travel. However, it opens an energy vortex around the disk for 1,500 miles in all directions. Activating the dimensional power plant would have resulted in the annihilation of the states of New Mexico, Arizona, California, and portions of Mexico, the nation. Possibly even further states would have been affected. Thus, the occupants chose to ride the ship down and hope for the best. They literally sacrificed their lives rather than destroy the populations within their proximity. The dimensional power plant was self-destructed, and the interatmospheric propulsion system was deactivated to prevent the technology from falling into the hands of the Terrans. This was done in accordance with their standing orders in regards to any compromise with contact experiences. And this has always, even though these are strange words, if the bismuth, magnesium, zinc had not held up as it has for 22 years as absolutely extraordinary nanotechnology, I wouldn't be reading you these strange letters. And if there was a self-destruct mechanism that deactivated technology, as this letter says, then maybe it affected the aluminum, maybe it affected the bismuth, magnesium, zinc. The letter goes on and says, Granddad spent a total of 26 weeks in the team that examined and debriefed the lone survivor of this Roswell crash, which we've identified by maps has to be in the White Sands area and not Roswell. Granddad's affiliation with this project ended when the occupant was to be transported to a long-term facility. He was placed, meaning this being, on board a U.S. Air Force transport aircraft that was to be sent to Washington, D.C. It might interest you that 3 fighter aircraft dispatched to investigate a distress call from the transport experienced many electrical malfunctioning system failures as they entered the airspace of the transport's last reported location. No crash or debris of the transport was ever found, and the team was disbanded. Now, I've put out a request to many people, and I will to the audience tonight. If anyone can find out any information in 48, 49, maybe even 50, of something happening, a disappearance, that would be about this, that everyone disappeared along with the U.S. Air Force transport aircraft that was sent to Washington, D.C. and disappeared. I would love to have those of you who are really interested in helping me do research see if you can find anything that would be going from Albuquerque or Roswell, going to Washington, D.C., that might have just registered in some media, newspaper, something in Ohio or beyond having to do with the disappearance of a craft. I need help with research on that. Now, here again is the Army Sergeant's close to this first typed letter that we received, and Art and I were talking about, wow, could this be true? And that we were going to dive into those pieces that I found out from Alcoa, that they were 99.5% aluminum. And Art and I talked specifically about that, the next slide, that he references Neil Armstrong. And he said, I agree with Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, a good friend of mine who dared to say, at the White House no less, that there are things out there which boggle the mind and are far beyond our ability to comprehend. Sign me a friend, close quote, repeating again because we were struck that this Army sergeant from South Carolina might know Neil Armstrong, adding more to the significance perhaps of the letters and of these metals. Well, now, it took 5 letters from the Army sergeant to specify what his granddad's journal said about the site location specifically. And here is an excerpt from one of those original type letters. Quote, precise location of the crash site. Trajectory track was plotted at 31 degrees 20 minutes to 32 degrees north latitude. The object reversed course exactly without any discernible deviation and proceeded to impact site between San Mateo Mountains and Sierra Blanca. Object debris spotted near Roswell Army Airfield within 30 miles radius of Roswell Base. But unless it is a typo, 30 miles, the words within 30 miles radius of the Roswell Base, it doesn't make any sense because Sierra Blanca Mountain is 90 miles west of Roswell, and another part of the type diary said the crash site was between those 2 ranges of mountains. It could be that the grandfather was saying that 30 miles in some direction from Roswell, that there was debris. And if that was the case, then it means there was a tremendous amount, perhaps a pod that comes out of a crash. Some of the pod, goes to white sand, somehow crossing the Sierra Blanca mountain and coming down maybe on white sands. So that's why there's been a lot of discussion that one possible crash location of the wedge-shaped craft from which the grandfather allegedly pulled off the bismuth magnesium zinc layered metal pieces from the bottom of the wedge-shaped craft. It could have been near the 1945 Trinity site below the Oscura Peak to the southeast. There is also a North Oscura Peak in the upper right corner. The grandfather wrote in his diary that he was with some security ringing that location and that it glowed for 3 hours from the bottom material. And that is what provoked the grandfather to try to pull some off. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso told me after his important book, The Day After Roswell, came out in 1997 in July, that he had personally been near the Trinity site on a UFO investigation and came face to face with a tall non-human, as he described it to me, who telepathically communicated to Colonel Corso, quote, "It's a new world if you can take it," close quote. And that is how Colonel Corso autographed his book to me at the 50th anniversary of the first publicly reported UFO crashes in July of 1947, and that famous July 8th Roswell Daily Record headline, "Roswell Army Airfield Captures Flying Saucer on Ranch in Roswell Region." But what I have been trying to, in a very compressed way, to get across tonight is that I do not think that the micron-layered bismuth magnesium zinc layered metal that I have been investigating for 22 years, since the spring of 1996, I don't think it has anything to do with what crashed in the first week of July 1947. There were a lot of crashes around that time. This is something later, and that makes it even more interesting. And that no one in 1947, 48, 49, into the early 50s would have understood nanotech layered metals at the micron and atomic level. So now, even though terahertz frequency research is difficult, and most of us have not encountered information about it except for the airport terahertz scanners, I would like to share with you something that I have reported since 2012, just to give you a flavor of what the research that filled a spiral notebook of almost 100 people that I had contacted, that ranged from physicists to exotic metals manufacturers, a lot of people in aerospace, a lot of people having to do with energy dispersive analysis of what this could be, wave dispersive. Cranford Labs in England did a study and told me that the layers in the bismuth magnesium zinc were intelligently placed, and the list went on, and making it even funny, even more of a challenge, was the exotic metals manufacturer in New Jersey that I called early on after we got the bismuth magnesium zinc. And I worked with a professor at a Midwestern university who was able to determine that the black layers were 1 to 4 microns of pure bismuth, and that the silver was 97.6% magnesium, 2.4% zinc, and that that we had something that had no bonding in it, So it was bonded at the atomic level. And all of this from 1996 to 2012, I had been reporting on the air, especially in the period of time between 1996 and 2004. Now, what happened in 2012 is that Dr. Hal Puthoff, who had had access to one of the bismuth magnesium zinc pieces in 1996, along with Paul Chu, who was being considered for a Nobel Prize for all the work he had done in superconductors. He had a piece, signed agreements to return to me, and I was in a process of all of these agreements that would go with people so that I get a piece or pieces back to keep doing investigations. And Dr. Puthoff at the Institute for Advanced Sciences in Austin, Texas, he had had the piece to study in 1996, came back in 2012, because by then I had received whistleblower information that it might be something that magnetic fields, perhaps oscillating, might affect it and turn it into a lifting body. So by the September 24th, 2012, I received this letter from Dr. Hal Puthoff about the bismuth magnesium sample. And I'm going to, after the first paragraph, it is about the fact that we couldn't find any anomalous interaction between the sample and magnetic fields is essentially what we were looking at. And then in the second paragraph that's marked with the marks around it, he says, as I indicated in earlier communications, there remains yet one additional test that really needs to be done, and which I recommend, that could in principle still provide a significant result, but which unfortunately we could not carry out with the instrumentation available to us. This relates to the observation that the bismuth channels, meaning those thin, black 1 to 4 microns, of the size seen in the sample, layered between magnesium layers of the size also seen in the sample, closely match, as given in physics literature, a waveguide structure that permits sub-wavelength terahertz signals to propagate freely through the waveguide, even though sub-wavelength in size, a quite unique property of these specific materials and their dimensional structure due to an unusual negative refractive index characteristic over a particular well-defined frequency range. And then he gives the wavelength range that we should try would be between 53 and 63 microns, which corresponds to a frequency range of 4.76 to 5.66 terahertz, or 4,760 to 5,660 gigahertz, a very high frequency that takes special equipment to reach. Now, one of the things that is interesting to me is that Dr. Puthoff suggested a couple of universities that I could follow up and see if they had or could make a generator of that frequency. And I followed up and they said they didn't and couldn't. And so this was 2012. And between 2012 and the beginning of this year, Dr. Puthoff had the sample to study half a dozen times. Jacques Vallée studied it for almost an entire year, trying to see also if they could work with these terahertz frequencies. Other scientists, like Paul Chu in Houston, he tried to see if there was anything that would fall into the superconductivity area, and he couldn't. And what is now so intriguing is that the more we learn about terahertz and the more we learn about the micron level and going down further of atomic and molecular structures being made at those levels, the higher in importance Dr. Puthoff's extremely intelligent paper to me back on September 24th, 2012, I think becomes. Clearly, the intelligence behind the phenomena of aerial vehicles that for the last 70 years have been reported, especially beginning in World War II and after, that can do these thousands of miles in the sky, stop on a dime, do a 90-degree turn, all of the stuff that David Fravor and the Navy jet pilots in December 17 or 16, 2017, it was December 17th, 2016, get my numbers right, that made the headlines in the New York Times and Politico and the Washington Post, and then it just went on and on and on, and we all have been feeling this increasing energy as more headlines have come from To the Stars, Tom DeLonge's TTSA, that Dr. Puthoff now works with others, and more headlines coming from other places in which it seems that the technology of the unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs, whatever it is that you want to call unknown and unidentified aerial craft that can move in the skies of Earth in ways that human pilots cannot move in matter aircraft. That the interest of a lot of scientists in the fact that this 1 to 4 microns of pure black with alternating like a torte cake with the 100 to 200 microns of magnesium zinc, which when you go to my Earthfiles at that special URL, you will see big macro photographs that show these layers very, very clearly. I was able to work with a very special lens in 1999 back east for a presentation that I was doing. And the layers, you can see them very, very clearly. And then in all of my Earthfiles reports, you're going to be able to see down to tremendous blow-ups that show very clearly the 1 to 4 microns of the bismuth alternating with the magnesium. And that when I had gotten some of the first wave of research of identifying what it was made of and other aspects that we were studying between the April, May to July, the question kept coming up, what about the isotopic ratio of the magnesium? Because in reports on UFOs going back even to the 1950s and then coming up into 60s and 70s, there had been reports like Ubatuba that they had found an isotopic ratio on the magnesium that did not match any Earth magnesium, and that if you could prove that, if you could come up with an isotopic ratio that clearly does not exist on Earth, sort of game over on, yes, this has to be from someplace else in the cosmos. So Art Bell and I split about $1,000 bill to have me go to Carnegie Institute in Washington to get what is called an ion microprobe analysis of one of the pieces of bismuth magnesium zinc that I had. And the idea was this was an ion microprobe that could analyze the isotopic ratio of the magnesium. I was there for 8 hours. In those 8 hours, and you will see a photograph of this in the Earthfiles reports, you can see all of the physical graphs and data of everything I'm talking about in my Earthfiles reports. I just thought it would be way too much for now. And that in those 8 hours, at one point he said, it's interesting, he said, you know, bismuth and lead are right next to each other on the periodic table. And usually you see spillover atoms from lead with bismuth. And he said, I'm not seeing anything in this, the 1 to 4 microns, except pure bismuth. Then he became very interested that when he would put the bismuth magnesium piece in to look specifically at the magnesium, he reported that it was releasing positive ions 60 times more than he was getting out of the normal baseline magnesium. He was puzzled by that and did the test over and over and over. I said to him, his name was Eric Howe, H-A-U-R-I, PhD, and sadly he passed this past year. Eric Howe, in his talking to me about what it was that he was finding, I said, well, you know, would positive ions possibly be related to a phenomenon that people have reported going back to at least World War II in the 50s on, where they see either a cloud in a blue sky that starts to transform and there's a silver craft of some sort, as if there was some ionization around the craft and then it clears, or the other way, that they see a craft in the sky and then it seems to generate something and disguises itself as a cloud. And we talked about that, not knowing exactly, except that it was to him, Dr. Eric Howe at Carnegie Institute in Washington, inside the ion microprobe, that he was finding this phenomenon of the 60 times release of positive ions. And in the end, he gave me a beautiful graph that's in my Earthfiles. And for those of you who have my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, the whole first chapter is devoted to all of this work that I was doing between 1996 and when that book came out in 1998, of all of this work that I'm describing now. And it's now more relevant in 2019 than it was in 1996 to 1999, meaning that this material is extremely important, and that the last discussion that I had with Dr. Eric Howe back in Washington in that 1996 period, would the 11% of the magnesium having 11% more magnesium 26, there's magnesium 24, magnesium 26, magnesium in lower numbers, so would that automatically, 11% more magnesium 26, throw it into an extraterrestrial category? And Dr. Howe said, no, it's sort of on the line. He said, when we do these isotopic ratio tests, and there is an average like this, 11% more, some people could argue that it is highly unusual, but he said, I'd have to go up higher, 15 to 20% or more. Well, now, the reason why I've gone through all of this with you and hope that you will go the next step after the broadcast and our questions is that I think that the bismuth, magnesium, zinc layered metal that came to us on Dreamland and Coast in May of 1996, and we're now in October of 2019, that it is without doubt extraordinary, and that this layered metal that I have been trying to get to the bottom of for 22 years, and now To the Stars is trying to do a serious effort, that we have had in our hands something made by technology or intelligences or artificial intelligence or other smart humanoids from somewhere else. And we ended up with this material as far back as the end of the 1940s that nobody understood. And the final comment I'll make tonight is that a physicist 5 years ago who said he worked at Area 51 in 1972 on a 6 foot by 3 feet, 6 foot by 3 feet piece of the same type of bismuth and magnesium zinc, layered, same layering, and he said he understood that it was a skin that went on the outside of a wedge-shaped craft, and it was paralleled by a skin on the inside of the craft that was what? 99.5% pure aluminum. And that down inside was atomic placement of iridium in very specific places in that aluminum. And that when the monatomic iridium and the bismuth magnesium zinc were activated by the, we'll call it the intelligent, sort of like fiber optics in between, that it would turn into a neutralized gravity zone around the craft. And that at that point there would be no inertia. He even said 5 years ago, Linda, you could blow on a 100-foot wide craft and it would move because there would be no inertia resistance. And where is that 6 foot by 3 foot piece of this material? It's all part of this evolution of finally getting to a place where the government and the people and the scientists and the military and all of us know the same basic information, that we're not alone in this universe, and that hopefully we will start being educated about who our government knows or thinks is the maker of the bismuth magnesium zinc, the 95.5% pure aluminum with iridium in it, and other artifacts that others are studying right now that might have come from other craft and other intelligences. And I really thank you for hanging in there with me on this. There are beautiful photographs that I'm going to have Peggy also post, but I wanted to go through this, and then Peggy, I would like to see, maybe I would like to go, if we could, an extra 10 minutes, so spend the next 15 minutes on questions and comments from our audience on all of this. Is Peggy there?
Just 1 second. This one, this one.
Is Peggy there?
Are we up and running?
Okay, now we are.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, let's go for the next 15 minutes from now. Let's go for full 15 minutes of questions and comments from our audience, and I will try to stay as short as I can, knowing that this is complex material, but I would love to know if people out there, do you think this is important and valuable for me to share?
I have a couple of thank yous to say quickly. Exodasha, Cat Chaser, Steve Adamski, Len Beeler, and Mr. Catfish, thank you for your super chats. They were appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you from me. Thank you from Chocolate, who is now in front of me, this big, he's really got his winter coat on. Brad, can you lift him up for just a second to these wonderful people who love cats, like the chat people do, and see if you can just, here. Oh, I just want, look at this big guy. Oh, he's getting his winter coat. I love him. All right, so super chats. Hello from Chocolate and from Fluffy. Yeah, here, put him back over there and see if he'll go to sleep. All right, what next?
A great question. Do you think that this means that the Army will be the first to announce that they can neutralize gravity through technology?
I would think that the Army, in the TTSA announcement, that this is their goal. I think they would be thrilled. I think anybody would be thrilled. But I've been trying to work with scientists, engineers, so many different people for 22 years, and I have seen how difficult sometimes science can be in cracking open something like the bismuth magnesium zinc that is so advanced. I think this is highly advanced material. Are the black world agencies, military, civilian, whatever it is, the black world where they have to have things classified and you have to have clearances, do they already know everything about it? And have they known everything, like the physicist 5 years ago who told me he had worked on a 6 foot by 3 feet slab of this, and that they understood it was part of skins that work together through very advanced AI to generate or neutralize gravity. I mean, there's a big jump between here's the hypothesis that Hal presented in 2012. Here is now another research project that will go forward. And maybe this is the chance for the black world of the Army and the military and the intel to use and funnel and bridge through TTSA what they are learning into technology that they could make an announcement about neutralizing gravity. That would be, to me, that's what we would all like, to get back on a planet where everybody is working toward the same goals, learning the same science, getting the most brilliant minds on everything in the white world and the black world, versus compartmentalization, everything is secret, only a few tiny people know, and it's all being done for war and weapons and Space Force. I think both of those are probably probable, both black and white, but I keep hoping, like I know Tom DeLonge, that was the way he talked to me in 2016, and I agree how great it would be if we could have civilians who would start sharing in the same black world knowledge and try to get it out into the white world that would help us in space and on our own planet. If this technology is as advanced as it seems like it could potentially be, we living on the surface of the earth, boy, we need as much help as possible in so many directions, having to do with trying to survive on a planet that may be headed into a complete different climate change. And it isn't just getting into outer space. It's what technology that may be from non-humans who could live in bases underneath the Earth and through the solar system and beyond, that we may be working in interstellar trade, how can they help us now as we are on a planet in which the weather is becoming more and more a factor everywhere? So it isn't just space, neutralizing gravity. It isn't just getting to portals. It isn't, I think that if this goes forward, where us living on the Earth and trying to get out into space, and all of it together with all of us knowing a lot of it and being then able to say, I'm behind this research, I'm behind this technology because you're going to try to help us humans too, that would be the best of all. But we'll see as things keep evolving. I know that this bismuth, magnesium, zinc is important. And then there's that other factor that I raised. If the letters, and you can read every word of all of the 5 typed letters, everything is at my earthfiles.com, so that you can read everything. If there was some kind of a self-destruct mechanism. Maybe the bismuth, magnesium, zinc are, I don't know, they might have been, they're not destroyed. They might have been hurt in some way, and we may not ever be able to reproduce whatever they were originally. See, that's another unknown. Are the bismuth, magnesium, zinc layered pieces, of which there's only a small few, would they be a legitimate and truly experimental base in which you could try terahertz frequencies? But if they were affected by a self-destruct mechanism, which is what the letters say, maybe they would never interact the way they did before whatever happened in this crash. So that's a question mark that I've had. Art and I and others talked about this back in 1996 a lot after we got the letters and read them all. How about another question?
A lot of people are concerned about the affiliation that TTSA now has with the government. And can we trust TTSA now that they are working with the government?
Well, I'll tell you, I have such great respect for Steve Justice, who is now their COO. In the couple of years that I was going, they had a piece of the bismuth magnesium that they now have from me in this new contract. But because we went through all of these agreements, you have to ship off and all of that, I got to talk with Steve Justice a lot. And I think that he is a brilliant mind who feels in private conversations the way so many of us do, that his goal would be, how can there be more win-win? How can there be more win-win for human civilization as well as places like aerospace and Space Force and the Pentagon and all that? There are needs, but do we have to live with so much compartmentalization, the rehiring over and over and over again of the same people because they have clearances that, say, a brilliant scientist at Stanford or Oxford or wherever they are is not in a government, is not an intel agency, and getting him a clearance is going to be difficult. And so the whole system rushes past some of the brilliant minds who might be cracking this, all because of the black world clearances. I know that Steve Justice would like to see what they originally wanted, which is working all of this out in the white world if possible. But because I have ridden this difficult project now for 22 years, working with really top-end scientists and seeing that nothing was really becoming clear. Hal Puthoff, PhD, engineer, founder, CEO, Institute for Advanced Science in Austin, Texas. He's been working on government, intel, and I guess civilian projects since the 60s at Stanford University, where I got my master's degree in communication, doing science, medicine, and environment. And Hal, who I have had the good fortune to have some really deep, profound discussions, I know that at his core, that he wishes that everybody, that there was more free flow evolution. But these guys who I truly like, deeply respect, here's the other part, that sadly we are on a planet where Russia is not considered a true ally of the United States. China is not considered a true ally of the United States. We can go around. And that one of the big, well, I think it's probably the top of the enchilada reasons in the black world why does everything have to be so compartmentalized and SAP access? And it's to keep the advanced technology that we have out of the hands of our competitive human civilizations on Earth. So you add that around the whole subject. And their challenge, TTSA, and let's give the United States Army some I'm going to say some space of consideration that they may want to work with TTSA, because not just making, that they're not always just interested in weapons, although that is a big part, obviously, of the military. But maybe what's happening is a kind of hybrid goal now. If we are going to start launching, because Elon Musk says his Starship, he wants to get it on Mars, or wants to launch to Mars in 2024. That's only 4 years from now. And maybe it's all beginning to be rapidly crunched into goals that are going to serve a lot of directions. That if the Army and TTSA or some other combination, that they could crack this and they would be able to take the technology that they learn from the bismuth, magnesium, zinc, and start applying it to crises on the Earth, as well as going to Mars and on the moon and out beyond, and introduce to us the intelligences that they know are the true makers. And I'm pretty confident, from having talked with that physicist 5 years ago, there are people in our government who know who the advanced intelligences are in some of these, I'm going to call them special access programs, where the non-humans are working side by side with Homo sapiens sapiens scientists. Whether it's military, whether it's NSA or DARPA, or whatever it is, that there are non-humans in a humanoid, more of the humanoid ones, and they're working side by side. I'm working on a story that I'm going to share here in more depth in a month or two. And I think that all of this comes down to what kind of a planet, not just the United, everybody says, what kind of a country do we want to be in? What kind of a planet do we want to go into the future on? It's everything from complete totalitarian police state planet to complete free support everybody, support every soul, try to have a planet that is healthy while we move out into space, not spreading just weapons, not spreading just military designs, but that we, all of us, would know who are the friendlies, who are the hostiles. There are hostiles out there, I have no question. Who are the neutrals? What do we actually know? And that all of us, if we were just told the truth and the facts, we'd get stronger, as we've discussed here before. That's my conviction. And that part of what may be happening, TTSA, they are some really good people who are trying really hard in a very, very, very difficult challenge. And that there's a black world of people, the physicist that has talked to me, the whistleblowers, Spartan 1 and 2, the Navy SEAL that came forward after Spartan 1 and 2, who has tremendously solid information, Brian S., who worked as a flight engineer in Antarctica, that there are so many people, and they are not bad. they care to their soul's heart. They care about what is happening to the United States in this world. And that somehow, if we could do the bridge, which is what Tom DeLonge talked about originally, if there could be a bridge between all of the black world into the civilian world, and we could open up in a big worldwide headline, we're not alone in this universe. Here are the reasons why bismuth, magnesium, zinc is an amazing potential technology that could neutralize gravity for sure if there was the right interaction perhaps with terahertz frequencies. And that it's almost as if 2019 going into 2020 in just, 10 weeks? I say November, December, yeah, 10 weeks. We are 10 weeks from New Year's Day 2020. Politically, our planet is unstable. Climate, our planet is unstable. Geophysics of volcanoes and earthquakes, our planet is unstable, and I have been told by geophysicists it could become a lot more unstable in the next decade. Why shouldn't we use this time now to tell the truth, to change the whole world's perspective on who we are, who has been working this planet for 270 or more million years, what we know about archaeology on Mars that matches the big archaeology structures underneath the ice in Antarctica, that matches the backside of the moon somewhere inside, and move the whole discussion, move the whole feeling that humanity does not need to be stuck in the military squabbles of the 20th to the early 21st centuries. That all of this, if it were all made public, and it was done with a positive context, that we have allies. We need to learn about those allies. We need to learn about the neutrals. And we need to learn, if there are hostiles, why? Why are there hostiles? What is that problem? And these are the kinds of dialogues that I hope to continue be having right here at the Earthfiles YouTube channel going forward, and that we will have that night, day, I don't care, sunrise, sunset, I don't care what time. If we get somebody there, email me. Linda, just heard NASA, the White House, the Department of Defense, TTSA, the Army, Air Force, Navy, anybody. They're getting ready. They're going to do the announcement. We're not alone in this universe. To all of you here tonight, doesn't it seem weird that those words, "we're not alone in this universe," have been something that governments and military have tiptoed around for centuries? That we are not alone in this universe, this fundamental truth, has been replaced by so many lies and policies of denial, that to say those words in the public in a big headline on the New York Times, The Guardian, "we're not alone in this universe and here are the reasons why," that somehow everybody's been conned into the idea that, oh, you can't say that. We are stronger. We are better. Religions will change and transform for what we learn. Our entire relationship with the earth will change. but it will be stronger and better because we'll be learning the truth. With that headline, which I just cannot believe is not soon to come, because we need it to break, so that the white world and the black world can really truly start speaking to this planet together, not in all of these compartmentalized, till death do us part policies of denial. 2020 could be the pivotal year for everything. Pivotal, meaning not the end, but the pivotal year. If we could go forward for the rest of the 21st century, finally getting everybody back on squares to tell the truth, I know that my fellow journalists, for the most part, just work so hard. I know I do, trying to find facts and to tell the truth. We are not in the business of fake news. That's a con. So if the entire next year was a complete change to we're all going to be told the truth together and keep going, it could just change so much of the poison and the toxins that seem to never go away. And with that, tonight, I'm going to say thank you to so many of you who send me some of the most heartfelt, soul-wrenching, amazing communications about your lives, your interactions with non-humans, so many other facets that I wish the whole planet could share together, because I think everybody feels better when they share. And that your questions, the chats, Facebook, Twitter, the richness of what you are communicating and telling everybody that you know, please subscribe to the Earthfiles YouTube live stream broadcast that I'm going to do as many Wednesday nights as I possibly can in and around TV production and other things that I'm doing. And that in this, that maybe there will be some way for all of you and me and Chocolate and Fluffy and Brad and Peggy and Eric and Ian and all to celebrate with champagne in front of our sets. When we get that headline, we're not alone in this universe and there's nothing to be afraid of. We're not alone in this universe, and it's at last, maybe we'll be on a planet in which the military and the corporations and the civilians will all be sharing more honest truths in the interest of a government here of, by, and for the people. See you next week.